Welcome, everybody, to the last webinar for 2023 that is organized by AAEEBL, ePortfolios Australia, and Eportfolio Ireland, three professional development organizations, networks that talk all about portfolios. My name is Christina Höppner, and I'm kind of representing AAEEBL in a way because I'm a member of the Digital Ethics Task Force, but I also feel a close connection to ePortfolios Australia because that's just right next door to the west of me in Australia. And so it's my absolute pleasure today to introduce you to our guest facilitator, Leticia Britos Cavagnaro, who comes from the D.school at Stanford and will talk to us about reflection and also the AI reflection bot Riff that she has developed. And that is how I got to know her a few months ago through Helen Chen, who's also at Stanford, who introduced us. And so I wanted to really make sure that all of us have the opportunity to learn about Riff. So Dr. Leticia Britos Cavagnaro is a scientist turned designer with a knack for creating transformative learning experiences. And you can see all of that in her recent book that was just published at the end of November, Experiments in Reflection, that she's also going to tell us a bit about. And if you stick around until the end of the session, you'll also have a chance to win one of 4 books. So please do stay in the session. So Leticia holds a PhD in developmental biology from Stanford School of Medicine and is a former member of the Research in Education and Design Lab from Stanford School of Education. She's the co-founder and co-director of the University Innovation Fellows, a program of the Hasso Plattner Institute of Design, better known as d.school, which empowers students to be co-designers of their education in collaboration with faculty and leaders at their schools. Leticia was the founding deputy director of the National Center for Engineering Pathways to Innovation, an NSF-funded initiative that operated from 2011 to 2016 to foster innovation and entrepreneurship in engineering education across the United States. And she's worked with hundreds and hundreds of schools, students, and faculty in her capacity at the D.school. And so it's my pleasure to have her here in our session today, facilitating us, helping us to connect reflection and artificial intelligence to kick off that conversation in the ePortfolio community. So over to you, Leticia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christina. And hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm beaming in from one of the studios here at the D.school that happens to be empty. We're getting to the end of our quarter here. And so I'm kind of occupying the whole studio, but I have all of you with me. So imagine you're here sitting around in this studio with me. I'm going to share my screen to get us started. Make sure that I choosing the right screen of the many that I have here. Great. Okay, so you should be seeing my title now hopefully. This is the title for our activity today. As Christina mentioned, I work here at the D.school, and a few of the things that I do beyond what Christina mentioned, I teach a class that I developed called Advanced Reflective Practice for our students in the master's program in Design Impact. I also work with university students and educators from all over the world through our University Innovation Fellows. This is a photo from our past global event in March where we bring them to the D.school. And these are faculty taking our summer faculty workshop experience. And the through line through all of the things that I do at the D.school, for me, it's about experimenting with learning futures, not only creating like the amazing experiences with the tools and the assets that we have available today, but imagining like what could be, right? Like, so running experiments about possible futures of learning. So we're going to dive right in the spirit of how we learn here at the D.school, and I'm going to have you do a little challenge. And this is going to be very short and sweet, like 30 seconds is all the time you have, and I'm going to kind of like do it at the same time with you. So in the next 30 seconds, you will need to kind of like look around your space. You might need to kind of like stand up and walk, or just from what you have in your desk, and find an object that represents some aspect of this semester. And I have a typo, I kind of like this semester quarter experience. So kind of like maybe you're wrapping up a semester or a quarter, or maybe you're kind of like going to a break, but like you've had like been teaching or working for the past term. Bring an object that represents some aspect of that period for you. Okay. And I'm setting the timer now. So go for it. Let's do it. Setting the timer and doing the activity at the same time. Okay. All right, 5 seconds left. And I'm going to stop sharing for a second so we can see. And there's my timer right there. So I'm going to ask people, if you're already not on camera and you're comfortable, to come on camera and show your object. What did you choose? What did you find? And we're gonna see if like Christina or her team can take sort of like a photo of all of us and our objects. So, and if you cannot come on camera, that's fine. But we'll ask you later to describe in the chat. So Christina, let us know when the photo is done.
Yep, just waiting a second longer until somebody else wants to join in.
Great.
Okay, I think I'll take a couple of screenshots. Keep smiling, everybody. And one last one. Okay, thank you so much.
Great. Awesome, awesome. So now I'm going to ask you to add in the chat, describe your object or mention what your object was and why you chose it, in which way it represents an aspect of your term or quarter. So go ahead and let us know that in the chat so we can see what happened. So we have like a leaping figure, joy, gratitude. Wonderful. James, thanks for sharing. Let's see what else we have, and hopefully we can save the chat later and we can add it to the presentation that we will share with everyone. Water cup. It's never empty, like what's on my plate. Always a new challenge. Wonderful. We have origami paper, a calendar, notepad, a calendar that pretends to organize me. The keyword being pretend. I love that. You know, it's kind of like, you know, there's objects that try, and like I tend to say my inbox is a to-do list that everyone else manages for me. There's some living creatures. There's some a cat, headphones, etc. Great, thank you for sharing all of that. A stress ball that is shaped like a cat, so we have some connections there, some like real cats and other types of cats. Wonderful. And a lanyard. Like we have lots of kind of like things that like physically we're using to kind of like relieve our stress. And let me share with you kind of like the object that I chose. I actually ran around and I found like in our prototyping cart, this like little like truck, right, like vehicle. And it made me think of kind of like, you know, how I'm kind of like always moving around and kind of like rolling with things and sort of like in autopilot, right? And for me, reflection, the value of reflection is to sort of like, you know, interrupt that mode of like always being on the go and kind of like stopping and noticing, right? Like, because when we are in autopilot, sometimes we fail to notice opportunities, notice what's there, right? Like, and we're kind of like in the, with the intention of being efficient, sometimes we kind of like miss, you know, surprises, opportunities that would lead us in a different, delightful solution. So I'm going to continue sharing my screen. And move on from there. So later on, we'll add our beautiful photo there. But when I talk about reflection and the power of reflection to interrupt this autopilot mode, reflection is one of those words that is defined like as a suitcase word, right? Those words that contain a variety of meanings, right? But until we unpack them, right, we might be talking about very different things, right? And so with the book that I recently wrote, Experiments in Reflection, my goal was to offer a definition of reflection that was not only just, adding one more definition to the many that exist, but actually providing a useful framework to incorporate reflection and grow our reflective muscles in an actionable way as learners, and with our learners as teachers. So I'm going to share with you that definition. It's a non-definitive definition of reflection. And I see reflection as a whole body process of transforming experience into meaning in order to shape the future. And for me, in that definition, there's 3 dimensions of reflection that we can kind of like start building muscles for. One is that of noticing what's around us with all of our senses, but also noticing what's inside, right? Like our feelings. Transforming experience into meaning is about making sense, interpreting, going beneath the surface, understanding motivations. And to shape the future is about envisioning. Oftentimes we think about reflection as like looking back, but I think it's equally important to reflect forward. So this definition is what has organized like the book that I wrote. And this is rooted in how we learn, how we know the brain as the integrator of our learning, has like the sensory cortex, which is about like getting information from the world, right? The integrative cortex about like making those connections and generating new understanding, and the acting to test new hypotheses and ideas and moving forward from the motor cortex, right? Like, so if you will, reflection is the synthesis of all of these ways in which, these modes in which that support our learning, right? Like, and this unlocks our whole learning power. So I'm going to invite you to do another activity, and this one you will need a piece of paper or a notebook, anything where you can write, and we're going to do a journey map of again, with the same topic that we started, your semester or quarter, and if you're on a break, kind of like your semester or quarter to date, if a break is coming up, and you can decide when to start. And you're going to map in the y-axis your emotions, right? Kind of like positive emotions, in moments that were more kind of like challenging emotionally, right? Like that didn't feel, productive. And so, and this is just kind of like a mock example, maybe look something like that, right? Like your shape will be different, right? It might have more ups and downs and different shapes, but maybe it's like, you're a moment of like low moment, you're feeling frustrated by bureaucracy, trying to get a project approved. I'm sure no one here has experienced that, but maybe a high is like, our paper was accepted, yeah, right? Like, so think about were some of those peak moments for you and that journey along the way. So I'm gonna give you 3 minutes to kind of like do a simple journey map of your semester or quarter. So go ahead, I'm gonna share some kind of like reflective music, and then we'll continue from there. All right, so we're going to pause there, and we're gonna get back to that and this reflection, but just wanted to share that in my work in design, what one insight that has driven my work in incorporating reflection in learning is that the methods that designers use to understand people, understand systems, right? Get to unspoken needs of the people that they're designing with and for, can be used to get to know yourself better and get to know those who work with you and your context, right? Like, so can be used to enhance your reflective practice. Also, that with my experience as a scientist and running experiments in the lab many years ago, that has led me to formulate in the book experiments in reflection. That's the title. And so the book has a collection of methods that are presented as a hypothesis with a method that invites you to test that hypothesis. And so one of those, for instance, experiment number 1, getting the mood for reflection, is about noticing moods and how they drive our behavior. And so this relates to a little bit of what we did with that journey map exercise. Another one of the experiments, make your thinking visible, it's about externalizing your thinking, right? Like through maps and different ways of representing your thinking, to think about your thinking, if you will. So that we did a little bit of that as well with this map. A third experiment that is also key is to craft questions and ask yourself and others, but mostly yourself, questions, different kinds of questions. So based on this method, I created Riff, which Christina mentioned, is a generative AI assisted reflection tool. And a Riff is, I describe it as an inquisitive chatbot powered by generative AI that is designed to ask you reflective questions that help you make sense and process your experiences. So you're going to, we're going to do one more activity that is about using Riff, and then we will reflect on it. Before we actually give you the tool, which you can do on your computer or on your phone, as you prefer, I think it's important with this and other generative AI tools to establish and discuss, upfront some rules of engagement, if you will, so that we make sure that you make the most out of your experience, and in a way that, minimizes the potential for harm as well. So here are some rules. Rule number 1 is to understand what this AI tool can and cannot do. You may be familiar with other generative AI applications like ChatGPT. And while ChatGPT is a general purpose tool, Riff has been optimized to ask questions, ask reflective questions in response to what you share with it. Riff is not intended to provide factual information or advice, and we know that generative AI is prone to hallucinations. However, so if Riff gives any of those, you should not take them at face value. The second rule is being mindful of how your data is being used. So in this case, I can tell you that what you write in exchange in the conversation will be visible to me, will be recorded and will be visible to me, but to me only. And you can think of it as like the equivalent of a written reflection that you would submit as part of coursework, right? But your conversation with Riff will not be used to train the large language models that power the tool. A summary or some excerpts from the conversation may be shared, and I will try to do this in real time with you today, with the group as a way to foster collective learning. Another rule that is very important is that you, as the human in the conversation, are in charge, right? So if Riff asks something that you don't want to answer or you don't feel is relevant to your reflection, you can just tell it to move on and ask something else. If a question sounds repetitive, or you can kind of like say that and like see if you can go in a different direction. Another important rule, and this like might be perceived as the flip side of that, is that you need to give Riff the context and details that it needs to be useful to you. So imagine that, the same way that if you had a conversation with another human and you only answered to their questions in monosyllables, right? Probably the conversation is not going to go far, right? Like, so the more that you add the relevant context, and data that's going to make the conversation more productive. And finally, this set of rules is not exhaustive, right? As we interact with this tool and with other AI tools, we need to be on the lookout to create new rules and figure out like what are other rules that we need to put in place so that these tools can be useful and not harmful. So with that, let's reflect. Okay, so I'm going to invite you to think about the map that you created just now. And this is the question that Riff is going to ask you. What was a peak experience? It could be a low or a high from your semester or quarter. Describe it succinctly, but mention a detail or two that made it memorable. Okay, so with that, I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to interact with the tool, and then we'll come back so that we can actually talk about it and share a little bit more about what's in the tool and how it's being used. So I'm going to put here a QR code. I'm going to also, let me grab the link and put it in the chat as well, so that if you want to click in the chat, you can do that. And as I said, I'm gonna give you 5 minutes. December 7th. Okay, so this link should work. So hopefully everyone has the link. I'm going to move to the timer and put some music. And yeah, I'll see you on the other side. All right, so we're going to pause there. Hopefully you got a chance to, have a meaningful conversation, or at least like long enough. We're going to pause the conversation. So you'll see there's an icon on the bottom right. And if you click on that icon, you will be offered the opportunity to receive an email with a summary of your conversation, along with some additional information. So if you like to get that, you can enter your email there. So go ahead and pause your conversation and enter your email if you wish. And I'm going to ask you a question. So thinking about the conversation that you just had, the reflection, with Riff that you just had, and thinking about those 3 dimensions of reflection that I talked about earlier, which of those did your reflection include? In terms of like noticing, kind of like maybe questions about your setting or more details or about how you felt. Oh, it says like the icon isn't working. Interesting. That's I'll see. Like I'm not sure. Okay, it seems like maybe it's like browser dependent. So Kathleen, like later if you can tell me what browser you're using, that might be helpful, or what phone. It seems like it's working for others. So like having extra information would be helpful. I'm sorry about that. And it's technology, right? Like it's not gonna be working all the time. So thank you for your patience there. So thinking about like, what types of questions Riff asked you about. Was it about like noticing and giving details, or about making sense, right? Like interpreting, making connections with other experiences, or about envisioning, right? Like future situations, new questions, new hypotheses. So we're gonna do that with Poll Everywhere. So if you can either go to pollev.com/d.school without the dot, or scan that QR code. We're going to see you can put the pin in this Venn diagram, and we'll see kind of like what kinds of where that conversation was going, and we'll see what happens. So hopefully that is activated. I'm gonna make sure that it is. Yes, it is. Great. I'm gonna just leave it there, so in case you want to still scan the QR code. Thank you for adding the link to in the chat. So there's a few of you in the noticing realm, and one that was kind of like all of those dimensions, or a couple of them. Really interesting. Great. There's some dots that are kind of like migrating still. That's really interesting. Great. So thank you for answering that. Let's see when we reach a steady state. It seems that so far they're like the noticing is kind of like more populated, which in a sense like makes sense because probably that's where you want to start, right? Like, so kind of like prompting a little bit of the noticing details. Great. Wonderful. I don't know how we're doing in terms of like number of people and answers, but I'm going to move us to the next thing, but feel free to like continue answering if you haven't already. Yes. Oh, sorry about that, Michelle, if it wasn't clear. Yes, you can only make one choice, meaning that if your conversation was only about noticing, then you go only to the blue circle, right? If it was about noticing and envisioning, then you would go in that intersection, right? If it was about the three, then like you go into the center of the circle, if it makes sense. Sorry that I wasn't explicit about that. Apologies for that.
And
yes.
Michelle, you can actually clear your response. If you go to the bottom, you have the choice to redo if you think you want to put the pin elsewhere.
Yeah, I got it now. Thanks
for adding. Yes, and my bad that I didn't. I just kind of like assume and moved on. But thank you for asking the question. Great. So what we are going to invite you to do now, is to discuss with other humans in breakout rooms. And I'm going to give you 3 prompts, knowing that you won't be able to get to all of these. We're going to only give you about 5 minutes to discuss, but here are some invitations to think about how did reflecting with Riff feel, and based on that experience, what might be the benefits or downsides of using AI for personal reflection? And as a more open-ended question, what other insights or questions emerge from this exercise? So Christina is going to put you into breakout rooms in trios, give you 5 minutes, and then we're going to bring you back and kind of like discuss as a whole group. So I'm going to stop sharing, and we're going to add these questions to the chat now so that you have that in your breakout room. So Christina, when you're ready.
I'm going with 9 breakout rooms. So for the most part, it'll be 3 people. It might also be 4, and you'll be assigned automatically.
Wonderful. So 5 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a good, however brief, conversation with your human core reflectors. I'm going to ask you, let's do a little bit of a chatterfall and kind of like take 1 minute to write down in the chat an insight or question from that meta reflection that you just had about reflecting with Riff. And then we'll, use those for like a verbal discussion. So go ahead and take 1 minute. Don't rush to hit enter. I'll let you know when, so you can focus on writing. So start wrapping up your brief, synthesis, and hit enter when you're ready. And take a minute to kind of like read what's there. It's kind of like peel different layers and modalities of reflection. Oops, that's my timer right there. Yeah, we have like really great super interesting comments. Go ahead, and if there's one that you're like, oh, let's discuss that, go ahead and kind of like use an emoji to kind of like signal your interest. Great. I love the butterfly emoji. Love it. Yeah, let's see what's bubbling to the surface of the interest of folks. There's like 3 butterfly emojis to, I don't know, like, and you can tell me if like there's a specific meaning of the butterfly emoji that I don't know, but I love it. So it says the AI seems good at drilling down, looking at what works and doesn't work, seeing how what you did in the past might or might not work in the future. Yeah, and that's interesting. And let me share something that we were discussing yesterday with my team in thinking about, like, I think, and based on like analyzing many conversations of learners with Riff, there seems to be sort of like we think there might be value in creating sort of like 2 different modes, if you will, right? Like one mode would be more kind of like Riff in kind of like prompting you to self-reflect and be more sort of like introspective. And the other one that is a little bit more practical is more kind of like, let's problem solve. Let's be kind of like, try to optimize and figure out what happened and like, what can you do better next time, right? Like, so there seems to be like a value in kind of like generating 2 different modes. And we can, now there's possibilities to fine tune the model in one direction or another, right? Like, and kind of like through prompting and through fine-tuning, generate those 2 modes. But if anyone, Shane or someone else, wants to comment on that, please go ahead, or anyone else.
I just thought, after a while, it started, the last comment it said was what might be some potential limitations of using your previous strategy in future projects, and how could you prepare to address similar challenges in a different context or with different stakeholders? And I thought, that was a particularly good question, because contexts always change and you're always dealing with different stakeholders. And so, a lot of the time your existing strategies actually don't work. They have to adapt to new people. So I thought that was particularly insightful, and I wonder where it gets that from.
Yeah. I like with generative AI, often it's difficult to kind of like pinpoint exactly. It's like, oh, this is exactly this part of like the instructions that the bot was shaped on. But I think it's part of that kind of like, analyze what went well, and like there's part of the instructions that talk about that kind of like what went well, what could be different. And I think like there's someone here who said something similar to, or kind of like similar to that, or I don't know if this is the exact thing, but Diane, I'm curious, like, so you're saying like you see potential for like this type of tool is like students who struggle with output, right, or have never reflected, but like what happens with like those students who reflect well, right, and have more awareness about reflection and practice, if like this tool might stifle creativity. So can you say more, Diane, about that?
Yeah, sorry, my cats decided to visit me.
That's wonderful.
I have a practicum course that I run, and I noticed that when I first started, getting them to reflect on their practicums, that some students were doing a wonderful job and with no instruction about how to reflect.
Yeah.
And other students really struggled. I would prompt them, I was the bot, prompting them to can you talk about this and why, and so over the years, I've figured out that I should probably teach people how to reflect. So I kind of have an exercise where they get to reflect, and I can sort of assess what kind of how they do. So the bot might be helpful in that way, instead of me trying to, teach them that I have a bot maybe showing them. But I wonder, for those students that already know how to do it, I kind of just want to let them go and use their creativity and their brain to come up with those prompts themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like overall, like, beyond this tool, right? And I should say my experience also like maps what you were saying, that, I think giving the opportunity and the space for reflection is important, but not sufficient, right? We need to really give tools to kind of like, so that they go deeper into, how to reflect well, and well that adds value, right? Like, so this can be a tool for that, but certainly it should not be the only tool, right? Like, so kind of like offering a diversity of tools. So kind of like, as I did today as well, it's kind of like, okay, we can use mapping, we can, talk to other humans, right? Like, so using a diversity of tools that meet different students where they are is absolutely essential for sure. I know that like time flies and we're kind of like wonderful questions, and thank you for sharing those. I want to move us ahead and just mention a couple of things before we we close. We want to be mindful of your time. Just wanted to share with you, I'm gonna skip this. Here is a summary that the tool created for me as the teacher, let's say, who invited you to reflect. This is a summary across all of your reflections, right? Like, so it captures some themes, mostly because you're all educators, right? Like about, educational practices, and kind of like, so these are some of your the themes that emerge, right? Like around building connections and systematic student-teacher feedback structures, modeling healthy work-life balance, the requirements for effective interdisciplinary collaboration. So like really interesting things that for me give me a sense of kind of like the group, right? Like, and so if this was kind of like about a learning experience, I could kind of like get a sense of like, oh, what stuck with them, what stood out, right? Like what made me some gaps, some more areas to explore. And this is our vice provost here at Stanford, and he was recently kind of in a presentation. It's like we need models that show how we can simultaneously democratize and humanize education, right? Like, so I think tools like this is not only about kind of like creating scale but also augmenting the human teacher, right? And so the teacher in the loop, and having the ability to customize the bot for each activity or class, and also the ability to see, analyze, and synthesize the students' reflections to make their learning visible, if you will. So this is just a quick view of the Riff teacher dashboard, where you see kind of like my bots on the left, and then kind of like the specs of this bot that I created for you, and kind of like I customized the opening question. I also selected not to ask for the name, but you could. And also kind of, and this is not from this one, but like the activity logs, where I can see the different reflections, the number of turns, and I can expand on a specific conversation or export them as well.
Yep. Leticia.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I think we are not seeing the screen.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So you have like yeah, I was like so excited about sharing with you. So I now will.
I know. I saw a lot of people nodding their heads, so I wasn't sure if it was just me.
Okay. So I'm gonna go here and just show you directly, right? Like anything else that I said is not important. Like this is the dashboard, right? Like, so you see kind of like the bot session. So in a bot session is like one that we did today, right? Like I customized the opening question, but I have other bots. And then like this is the activity log tab, where I can see everyone's, and this is not from this one, but someone else, and I can kind of like go into one particular one or export it. And really kind of like the value for the students of making learning personal, like creating those connections, which is like what reflection does, basically, but also helping the teachers make learning visible and assess learning outcomes and teaching practices. And one thing I wanted to mention, like right now we're in like private beta, and I'm getting lots of requests for access to the platform to create your own bots from educators. But recently I've also gotten requests from students, and I'm not sure even where they're coming from. So we're reaching out to the students who are asking for this, and it's like, why are you asking for this? How do you want to use this tool, right? Like, so, and learn more about that, and kind of like thinking about the students side and how can we create a tool that maybe the students can be capturing the reflections and saving them the same way that the teacher can do, right? Like, so it's student centric. So if you're interested in trying, I think we have already shared this link. And yeah, and I just wanted to kind of like end this session before we go to the raffle and close with kind of like, you know, a one-word reflection about this session. And I know kind of like at the end, we like was very, very quick. We didn't have enough time for conversation, but hopefully you had, you know, a taste of the experience, and kind of like it prompted more questions for you. And happy to kind of like chat, stay, and also connect at some other point with any of you. I love your questions in the chat. Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Leticia. Let's leave the word cloud up there for the time while we are doing our prize draw. And yes, thank you so much for taking us through how you approach reflection, and also what you have done with Riff, giving us a brief insight into that tool that we can now use to explore more, because there were lots and lots of questions, of course, in the chat. So I'm pretty sure that we will, the three organizations of us, AAEEBL, ePortfolios Australia, and ePortfolio Ireland, will look into hosting another webinar where we can then, within the community, take on those questions and explore them further beyond this introductory session, so that we can make more sense of everything. So thank you so much for giving us that input. But now, in the interest of time, everybody probably needs to go to the next meeting. Therefore, very, very quickly, we have 4 winners. Number 1 is Patricia Lucas from Aotearoa, New Zealand. She was the first to enter the session. Then we have Anne Simmons, who made the first non-location comment. They are from the United States. Then Shane Nusler from Australia. He was the first to share from a breakout room. And then special mention to Diane, because she had a cat visitor, and she's from Canada as far as I can see. So we have 4 winners from 4 different continents for 4 different reasons. We will be in touch with an email to sort out how you want to have your book, be that as a paperback or electronically. So no, you don't need to give me your email addresses, because I have them through registration. So thanks everybody for joining us. And Alison, if you want to have the last word.
Yeah, maybe 2 quick words. One is thank you so much to Leticia for a fantastic session. I found it really useful in terms of always talking about the power of reflection, but also the opportunity that Riff gives as a personal reflective assistant to students in an inclusive way. So, you know, I pick and choose whether you need that support or not in that. And also thank you to Christina and Helen and Tracy and others who've helped bring this webinar together. And then just one really quick comment is we're also looking for a venue for the 2024 ePortfolio Forum, ideally within the Southern Hemisphere around Australia and New Zealand. But I'm just putting it out to the universe. If you have an organisation that would give us a venue in kind, then please get in contact. So thank you, everybody. I'll be quiet.
Thank you, everyone.
I just want to say thank you to Christina and Helen on behalf of AAEEBL for doing this, because I had nothing to do with it. So I really appreciate all of your efforts. This was an amazing session. Thank you, Leticia, so much.
Thank you all. Thank you. I really appreciated working with you. please connect with me if you can, if you want to continue the conversation.